When we think of Turkey today, we picture a modern country. But the land itself, well, that's a whole different story. It's like a grand stage where some of history's greatest empires rose, clashed, and fell. It's this incredible crossroads where continents and cultures have been meeting for thousands of years. So this isn't just the story of one nation. It's really the story of an empire of empires. To really get a handle on this, we have to go back, way, way back. Our story kicks off 12,000 years ago at a place called Göbekli Tepe, where people built the world's first known temples. We're talking before the wheel, before writing, before, well, almost everything. Then we're going to leap forward to 1453, a date that literally changed the world when the walls of Constantinople came crashing down. And we'll bring it all home to 1923 with the birth of the modern Republic of Turkey right from the ashes of that old empire. It is one heck of a journey. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll dig into why this piece of land is so important, this crossroads of civilization. Then we'll look at the ancient empires that came before the Turks. After that, we'll cover the arrival of the first Turkish empires, then dive deep into the legendary Ottoman conquests, their incredible peak and their long, slow decline. And we'll finish up with the creation of Atatürk's modern republic. Okay, Chapter 1, the crossroads of civilization. So, why did so much history happen right here? Honestly, it really boils down to one thing: geography. Anatolia, that huge peninsula that makes up most of Turkey, is the literal bridge between Europe and Asia. For thousands of years, if you wanted to march an army, trade goods, or spread new ideas between continents, you pretty much had to go through here. It was the ultimate piece of real estate destined to be fought over again and again. Now, what's really wild is that before the Turks even showed up on the scene, this land was already ancient. It was home to some of history's most important civilizations. You can think of them as the ones who laid the foundations, leaving behind this incredibly rich, layered legacy for everyone who came after. And what a list it is! First up, you have the mighty Hittites, who are masters of ironworking and went toe-to-toe with the Egyptian pharaohs. After them came the Phrygians, yep, the folks from the King Midas legend. Then the colossal Persian Empire rolled in, building these amazing roads to manage their territory. Of course, their rule was smashed to pieces by Alexander the Great, who brought Greek culture with him. And finally, the ultimate power of the ancient world showed up: Rome. The Romans absorbed the whole region, building aqueducts, theaters, and a legal system that defined the area for 1,000 years. It's like every empire left its own layer of history. And that brings us to Chapter 3. For centuries, the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, was the big power here. But from the vast steppes of Central Asia, a new force was on the move. These were the Turkic peoples, nomadic, brilliant horsemen, and incredible warriors. They started migrating west, and they were about to completely upend the balance of power. Now, here's a really crucial point. The Turks didn't show up to challenge an empire at its absolute peak. Not at all. The Byzantine Empire was basically a shadow of its former self. It was old, tired, and it had never really recovered from being sacked by its own Christian allies during the Fourth Crusade. This created a massive power vacuum in Anatolia. And who rode right into that vacuum? The Seljuk Turks. They were fast, they were skilled, and they had a killer tactical advantage: a powerful short bow they could fire with deadly accuracy while on horseback. The stage was set for total takeover. So, after the Seljuk Empire fell apart, Anatolia splintered into a bunch of smaller Turkish states. And it's from one of these tiny little principalities, barely bigger than a county, that one of the greatest and longest-lasting empires in history would rise. This is where the Ottoman Age of Conquest begins. It all starts with one guy, Osman. He wasn't some distant king sitting on a throne. He was a leader who ruled from the saddle, eating with his troops, fighting alongside them. But his real genius was in his strategy. He shared the spoils of war generously with anyone who fought for him. This wasn't about religion, it was about success. And that practical approach attracted the best warriors from all over: rival Turks, even Christians. They all wanted to be on the winning team. And his followers? They became known as the Osmanlis, or as we call them, the Ottomans. As the empire grew, Sultan Murad I came up with an absolutely revolutionary military idea: the Janissaries. This was, for all intents and purposes, Europe's first professional full-time army. They would take young Christian boys from the Balkans, convert them to Islam, and then put them through years of brutal, intense training. They were taught that they had no family, no home, no loyalty to anyone or anything except the Sultan. While it was a source of terror for many families, the Janissaries became so powerful and prestigious that later on, some parents actually hoped their sons would be chosen. It was a path to incredible power. So with this incredible army, the Ottomans just swept through the Balkans. But there was one prize that was always out of reach, the crown jewel of the old empire, protected by walls that everyone believed were impossible to break: Constantinople. The question that obsessed generations of sultans was simple: how in the world do you conquer an impregnable city? Well, in 1453, a super ambitious 21-year-old sultan named Mehmet II decided he had the answer. He brought a massive army, something like 100,000 soldiers, against the city's tiny garrison of maybe 9,000 defenders. His secret weapon was a monster cannon, built by an engineer named Urban, that could hurl 1,000-pound stone balls over a mile. The Byzantines, on the other hand, were putting all their faith in their legendary 14 miles of walls and their own secret weapon, Greek fire, this terrifying chemical that could actually burn on water. After weeks of brutal siege, Mehmet did something that sounds like it's straight out of a movie. A giant chain was blocking his ships from entering the harbor, so he had his men drag 80 ships overland on greased logs up and over a 200-foot hill and drop them into the city's much weaker inner harbor. The defenders were completely stunned. A little while later, the giant cannon finally punched a hole in the land walls. The Janissaries poured through, and the last Roman emperor died fighting on the streets. Constantinople had fallen. The world was never the same again. Taking Constantinople, that was the moment the Ottomans went from a regional power to a true global empire. This next chapter is all about that empire at its absolute peak, its golden age of splendor, and then its long, slow, and pretty painful decline.
The empire's absolute zenith came under one man, Sultan Suleiman. Now, in the West, they called him Suleiman the Magnificent, but to his own people, he was known as Kanuni, the lawgiver. Suleiman saw himself as an equal to the other great kings of his time, like Henry VIII in England. He wasn't just a regional ruler, he was a major player on the world stage, and he was determined to make sure everyone knew it.
And boy, did he prove it. Suleiman pushed his armies right to the gates of Vienna. He commissioned his master architect, Mimar Sinan, to fill Istanbul with some of the most beautiful mosques in the world. He created a comprehensive legal code that could govern his huge, diverse empire. He was also a brilliant politician, cleverly supporting the Protestants in Europe just to weaken his Catholic rivals. But maybe his most lasting impact came from inside the palace. He broke with centuries of tradition and married his favorite concubine, a woman named Roxolana, which kicked off an era of palace intrigue that would change the dynasty forever. So what happened? How does an empire like this begin to decline? Well, a huge factor was a basic change in what it meant to be the sultan. The early guys, like Osman and Mehmet, were warrior kings. They led their armies from the front. And succession? It was basically a brutal free-for-all where the toughest, smartest prince won. But after Solomon, sultans mostly stayed cooped up in the palace. This old, ruthless system was replaced, and you ended up with a string of weak, inexperienced rulers. Power moved from the battlefield to the backrooms of the harem, and the empire just wasn't as dynamic as it used to be. And the decline, it was a long, agonizing slide. It really started in 1699, the first time the Ottomans were ever forced to give up a big chunk of territory to the Europeans. Over the next couple of centuries, the world just changed around them. Europe got rich from the New World and the Industrial Revolution, while the Ottoman economy kind of stagnated. A newly powerful Russia started pushing down from the north, and nationalism, an idea born in Europe, started to rip the multi-ethnic empire apart from the inside. One defeat after another, bankruptcy, losing almost all their land in Europe. The once mighty empire got a new nickname, the Sick Man of Europe. The final nail in the coffin was World War I. The Ottomans picked the losing side, Germany, and the victorious allies literally planned to carve up what was left of the Turkish heartland. But right from the ashes of that total defeat, one man would rise up to build a brand new nation. This is the story of Atatürk and his modern republic. And that man was Mustafa Kemal. He was already a national hero from the war, especially for his incredible command at the Battle of Gallipoli, where he stopped the Allied invasion cold. As the only undefeated Turkish commander from the entire war, he had enormous credibility. He used that prestige to rally the Turkish people, tear up the humiliating peace treaty, and launch a new war for independence against the Allied occupiers. After he won the war, Kemal, who was given the name Atatürk, meaning father of the Turks, unleashed this absolute whirlwind of reforms. He wasn't just changing a government, he was trying to change an entire civilization, top to bottom. He got rid of the 600-year-old Ottoman Sultanate. Done. He created a secular republic, separating religion and state.
He swapped out the complex Arabic script for a simple new Latin alphabet to make it easier for people to read and write. He gave women equal rights, including the right to vote, years before a lot of Western countries did. And he even banned traditional clothes, like the fez, which was a huge symbol of the old empire.
So you have to wonder, did all these shocking changes actually work? Well, let's just take one example, the new alphabet. It was designed to be much easier to learn than the old Ottoman script. And in just 1 year, one single year, after it was introduced, the literacy rate in Turkey shot up by 500%. I mean, that's a stunning success. And it just shows you the incredible speed and scale of what Ataturk was trying to do. And that brings us full circle. From the world's very first temples, through this incredible succession of ancient powers, a legendary Islamic empire, and a dramatic secular revolution, this land has constantly reinvented itself. And today, Turkey still stands right there at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, of tradition and modernity, of East and West. Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder. Situated between worlds, what is the next chapter in Turkey's 12,000-year story?